insight into how big of a mess this is going to be, even after they get this deal done. If they hope to start the season on time, the amount of things they are about to cluster into one group is pretty wild, to be honest with you. And on top of it, this is a league that's been notorious for looking.
Look at that timeline. March 10th isn't when signatures go on paper. It's when the handshake happens. And between that handshake and actual basketball, we're talking about a logistical nightmare that would make most professional leagues sweat. The WNBA is staring down a deadline that could derail its entire 2025 season. And the clock isn't just ticking. It's screaming. Here's what nobody's talking about. Even if the players' union and the league shake hands on March 10th, that's just the beginning, not the end, the beginning. Because what comes next is 3 weeks of legal paperwork, followed by an expansion draft, followed by free agency involving over 100 players, followed by a college draft, and then 6 days later, training camps open. This isn't a tight timeline. It's organizational malpractice waiting to happen.
Times where the WNBA feels very AA baseballish. All right? I don't even want to say AAA. I've seen, like, when it comes to television broadcasts, forget about it. There's AAA broadcasts that are better than most non-WNBA national telecasts there are on TV. And one could argue the NBA TV broadcasts aren't very good either. Let's get to this. March 10th, drop dead date. This is the date an agreement would need to be reached, not the date the ink has to be dropped.
AA baseball. That's the comparison, and it's not unfair. When you look at how the WNBA has operated historically, the broadcast quality, the organizational structure, and the way it handles major business decisions, there's been a consistent pattern of looking unprepared for prime time. And now they're about to compress an entire offseason into less than 7 weeks. Think about what needs to happen between March 10th and May 8th. Revenue sharing agreements need to be finalized. Housing standards have to be established. Roster construction rules need to be codified. Minimum salary structures require approval. And all of that has to go through lawyers on both sides, then get voted on by team owners, and finally ratified by the players' union. That we're not talking about a simple contract extension. This is a complete collective bargaining agreement covering every aspect of league operations. The March 10th date wasn't chosen randomly. According to broadcasting sources who spoke anonymously, television networks need at least a few weeks to clear time slots and lock in broadcast windows for early season games. Without that buffer, the WNBA risks losing its TV schedule entirely. And if they lose the TV schedule, the league is cooked. Those broadcast deals are the financial foundation everything else is built on.
Get to work. This date gives both sides less than 2 weeks from today to come to an agreement on revenue sharing, housing, minimum standards, roster construction rules, all of the other priorities the league and the players have laid out throughout the CBA process. Once a term sheet is in place, lawyers from each side would get to work codifying the specifics of the agreement, and the owners and players would have to vote to ratify it. It's unclear why this specific date was chosen by the league, but it tracks with information from a source in broadcasting who was granted anonymity to speak on the issue. The source said a few weeks would be needed to clear television time slot.
March 31st. That's 3 weeks after the handshake deadline. That's when the lawyers finish codifying the specifics and the actual agreement gets signed. But here's the problem. During those 3 weeks, everything remains status quo. The moratorium stays in place. No free agency. No transactions. No trades involving college draft picks. Franchises are completely frozen. For fans expecting big offseason news and player movement, those 3 weeks are going to feel like dead air. No announcements, no signings, no drama. Just legal teams working through contract language while everyone else waits. And remember, this is a league that desperately needs to maintain momentum coming off what they're calling their most successful season ever. 3 weeks of silence isn't ideal when you're trying to build on that energy, but it gets tighter. April 1st. protected player lists are due for the expansion draft. Portland and Toronto need to know which players are available and which ones are untouchable. And that's happening while the CBA is still being finalized on paper within the WNBA. From April 3rd through 5th, the NCAA Women's Final Four and the NCAA Women's National Championship take over the sports world. The WNBA specifically scheduled around this because they know they can't compete with college basketball for attention. Those NCAA tournament ratings dwarf anything the WNBA puts up on national television.
Games. So that's why they gave them the March 10th date for television broadcast. Makes sense. If you lose your TV broadcast, you're cooked. The league is cooked. March 31st, a signed contract. Even with a handshake on March 10th, it would likely take about 3 weeks for the lawyers to get everything done and for an agreement to be signed. It's important to note that in the time between the handshake and the agreement, everything would remain in status quo and the moratorium would remain in place that would prohibit free agency transactions. Furthermore, franchises couldn't trade college draft picks, so no one should expect too much news during this time. You also got to remember that you got FIBA qualifiers in there, by the way. On April 1, Portland and Toronto would receive...
April 6th, the expansion draft finally happens. Portland and Toronto are on the clock, selecting from players other teams were willing to leave unprotected. It's a massive moment for two new franchises trying to build competitive rosters from scratch, and it's happening exactly 5 weeks before the regular season tips off in the WNBA. Then immediately, and I mean immediately, the free agency period kicks off on April 7th at 12:01 p.m. Eastern. This is when teams extend qualifying offers to restricted free agents and potentially apply the core player tag to unrestricted free agents. Normally, this period lasts 10 days. In this compressed timeline, they're looking at condensing it to 2 or 3 days maximum. April 7th through 11th becomes a frantic negotiating window. Phones buzzing, cap sheets glowing, front offices running on caffeine and cross fingers, where teams are trying to figure out which players they're keeping, which ones they're letting walk, and what their salary cap situation looks like under whatever new CBA terms were just agreed to. Front offices are making critical roster decisions with barely any time to strategize or plan. It's the kind of rushed decision-making that plants landmines in a franchise's future, the sort that detonate years later. The league has proposed eliminating the core player designation entirely. But assuming it survives in the new CBA, general managers may have roughly 72 hours to decide who gets that tag. That's a massive decision, essentially franchise tagging a player in less time than it takes most people to plan a weekend trip.